Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Elena, for the great introduction. My name is Konstantina Christakopoulou. I am a staff research engineer and tech lead at Google DeepMind, and I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about thinking fast and slow, conversational agents that think, plan, and grow with us. So let me give you a little bit of background on me. After finishing the University of Patras here in Greece, I went to the University of Minnesota where I did my PhD. And over there, during several internships, I did influential works on conversational recommendation. After that, I joined Google, and the first couple of years, I led cross-PA collaborations with different teams on how do we align these recommendation platforms with human values. And then around 2021 until 2024, I was the co-founder and tech lead of what we call the project Ally, Google Brain Moonshot, which was standing for how do you assist users' lifelong journeys. And then after that, most lately, I've been leading agentic development on the personal health agent project in Google DeepMind. So in this talk, I will talk and I will share insights and learnings from the Ally Moonshot and the Personal Health Agent project. And so before I begin, special thanks to all of my collaborators there. So one of the first things that you need to do when you're thinking of how do you assist users' lifelong journeys is what exactly are these meaningful journeys that people pursue. And so the first thing that we did then was to conduct this user study of figuring out in these top recommender platforms in industry, what are these meaningful journeys that people pursue? And through that, we uncovered this taxonomy that you can see over there, where you can see very interesting things like DIY, learning new skills, hobbies, well-being, travel, parenting, so on. So what you can see here is that, of course, all of these interests, they are very meaningful to the users, but then at the same time, these are things that will need these multiple interactions in order to make progress on them. And so it needs to go beyond one-off interactions. In fact, when we asked the users of how long do they pursue these journeys, we found that at least 50% of our users, they pursued one of these meaningful interest journeys for more than a year. So what this shows us is that there is this need for longer-term planning for these journeys that evolve on and off the platforms for a long period of time, months or even years. So then our overarching goal becomes, how do we build this collaborative partner that can understand you, that can speak your language, and that can help you pursue your own personal journey? So what this means is that we need to go beyond chat partners to how do you build these lifelong collaborators for users. And so the focus of this talk is going to be on how exactly we're thinking about how do we approach this problem of building these lifelong collaborators. To attempt to answer this question, I will share with you two stories. So the first story is on conversational planning for personal plans, and then the second one is on thinking fast and slow. So let's start with the first. In order to get started, let's think about a query that might be relevant to this well-being category of meaningful journeys. And so this query can be, I want to sleep better. And of course, sleep is a cornerstone of our well-being. So here you can see what the current chat interfaces might look like when a user issues a query of, I want to sleep better. So you can get a lot of useful advice, but then this advice can be general, and also it might be a lot at the same time, and so it might have a lot of cognitive overload for the user. Similarly, if you get a query from the learning new skills part of the taxonomy, which is, let's say, I want to learn how to draw, you might get like a full-on multi-paragraph text, which is all about different aspects that you might care about, like colors and shapes and so on. But it doesn't feel very personalized, and it doesn't connect you to content right then and there. And so can we do better than this? And we think so. We think that the answer is yes, and that there is this unique opportunity of how do we advance these conversational agents to accompany users along these evolving journeys on and off the platform. So we think there are two technical fronts that we can make progress here. One aspect is the front-end user experience. And so one key aspect is that besides only the chat interface, you might want to have some structure in the experience. Also, you might want to connect users to content right then and there while they're asking these different questions. And then you don't only want to react to the user feedback, but you also want to be proactive, asking them the right questions at the right time in order to propel their journey forward. The other aspect that we can make progress on is on the back end. And so the idea here is that because these journeys evolve for a long time, you should be doing long-term planning. And so the question is, how do you do long-term planning with LLMs so that then you can adapt based on user feedback and you can provide extra interpretability to the users? So let's start with the back end. In our answer to the question of how do we collaborate with users on planning for their personal plans, we propose doing hierarchical multi-step reasoning and planning. And we propose what we call here the Journeyfy agent. So first of all, let's look into the keywords. The one keyword is collaborate. So you want to make sure that the AI co-creates with the user their plan. And so that's very important because the user needs to have this sort of agency over their plan. The second keyword is the part of personal plans. So the plan needs to be personalized for the specific context, for the specific user, at the specific stage of their journey. And so here in our solution, we're trying to do exactly that. So we're thinking that in certain journeys, a user might start with a very vague goal, like what we said before of I want to sleep better, or I want to learn how to draw. And so a key insight here is how do you help the user decompose this goal into sub-goals? Or for example, how can you help them delve deeper into some aspects of their journey? And so to do that, in our agent, we have these multiple modules. The first module is this LLM-based meta controller that will decide what is the next macro action to take, where in our setting, macro actions can be, do I want to add new steps to the journey plan? Do I want to alter existing steps to the journey plan? Or do I want to ask a follow-up question? Then given that macro action, you want to have these LLM-based policies which are trying to execute this macro action. So for example, they will be the ones that will actually define what should be the exact journey steps to add, or how do you exactly alter the journey step, or what should be the exact follow-up question to show to the user. And then given that, you want to have this extra module, which is all about doing tool use and fetching the right content via calling APIs, like for example, Google search or YouTube search and so on, in order to fetch the right content, and then using LLMs to rank this content for the context for this journey step. And then, of course, all of that is a loop. So then you get the user feedback, and you use that to update what is the next macro action to take, and so on. Now, the second front that we said that we think you can make progress on is the experience. And so, as I said before, one of the key aspects is that the users, they do want to feel more control of their journeys. And so a chat-only experience might not be the only way to go. So we really believe in this notion of structure. And so here the notion of structured experience comes from this, what we call journey plan, that consists of these multiple journey stops. And so if, for example, you have this query, which is, how do I explain inventors to my kids? Then one of the key aspects is how do we decompose this journey into these structured journey stops? So maybe you start with this more general plan of start with stories, use everyday examples, visit museums or science centers, and you can see on the right how, for example, this start with stories, it comes with a description, it comes with relevant articles, relevant videos, maybe there is an explanation for each one of them, and so on. Now, the other key aspect that we think is important for the experience is being able to refine the plan based on the user feedback. And so the way to refine the plan is via using either answers to proactive questions or by adapting to the user feedback. So what I show you here is that, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, there are always these proactive questions that are being shown to the user relevant to the journey plan above. And so, for example, if here the user decides to answer this question of what is the favorite invention of your kid, and the kid says something like tablets and computers, then what you can see then next is that this new step of investigating modern inventions and all about being computers and tablets is being shown. Or now, if, for example, the user is saying on their own in this free-form chat interface that I want to introduce more female inventors to my kids, then you can see that these new steps on introducing Ada Lovelace and Grace Hopper and so on show up. Similarly, you can see that this experience can work in many, many other domains in all of these aspects that I shared before on this taxonomy of meaningful user journeys. Here you can see an example from personal fitness, which comes from the well-being domain. And so, for example, in the I want to do CrossFit, maybe you start with this more general plan, but then once this question is shown up to the user, like what are your fitness goals? And maybe you say that I want to improve my cardiovascular health, then you can see that this existing step on setting realistic goals is being altered to be all about cardiovascular health goals. So then you can get an idea of how this combination of the front-end experience together with the back-end hierarchical planning can help achieve this collaborative planning for personal plans that we said before. Now we're ready to move into the second story, which is the second piece of the puzzle of how do you build these collaborative partners to the user. And this part of the story is the thinking fast and slow. So the idea here is that a user might not only care about getting this collaborative plan from AI. So for example, let's say you have this AI coaching agent. Typically, when a user comes and says, I want to sleep better, they don't directly expect a plan. What they expect in the beginning is to have this meaningful conversation with a coach, which is all about helping them understand what are their barriers, their goals, motivation, and so on. And so making sure also that the coach is really, really empathetic. And then once they have this common understanding, then they can collaborate on setting a SMART goal, and then after that, planning towards this goal. So to make this more concrete, what do we expect from a coach? We expect this empathetic coaching tone, being able to understand the user barriers, concerns, and goals, and then collaborating on setting goals and making plans. So then these, of course, become our guiding design principles and the core of our evaluation rubrics. So then if you abstract this a little bit away, what you can see is that in reality what you care about is to have these coaching agents that are good in two fronts. The one front is being great at conversation, and the other front is being great at planning. And so you want to have these agents that are both agile conversationalists, but then at the same time, they are amazing strategic planners. And let's have this part of the talk for the domain of personal health. So for example, for queries like, I want to sleep better, eat better, I'm feeling stressed, I want to get more fit. And so if we think then about this domain, at a high level, you want to design this agent that will have different things in memory, let's say past conversations, maybe the previous agent state. It will have access potentially to journal entries of the user, data coming from sensors, and so on. And then at the high level, the agent needs to be able to do two things. It needs to be able to form the conversational response to show to the user, as well as what is the next agent state that is going to drive this multi-step reasoning and planning, which is involved for getting this personalized coaching plan for a user. And so how do we do this? The way we did this is by thinking, as Elena was saying, about this theory of thinking fast and slow, which is the theory of Daniel Kahneman of how exactly the mind might work. And so typically, there is this construction of two systems being able to work together when we're trying to think. One is system one, which is this system always on, being the one interacting with the environment, being the one which is very fast, very responsive, very intuitive, always on. And then for these more complex problems, where there is this need for, let's say, decomposing a problem into sub-problems, or getting all of this information from system one and then forming these new beliefs about the world, then there is system two, which is much more slow, much more logical, and much more deliberate. And so similarly here, we propose this dual agent architecture, which is called talker-reasoner architecture, where the talker plays the role of system one, fast, intuitive, responsive, and then the reasoner plays the role of system two, which is the one doing the slow thinking, which is typically involved for this multi-step reasoning and planning. And so the talker is easy, really. So for the talker, you can use your favorite LLM, and you can prompt it with the right instructions to make sure that it's really being able to conduct this conversation in the way that the user might care about. Now, the reasoner is a little bit more involved. So for our case, for coaching agents, the reasoner has three key jobs. One job is to be able to decide what is the coaching phase that the user is on. And then this is important because in this case of a coaching journey, there are different needs of the user in different steps. So for example, we have the understanding coaching phase, where it's all about using motivational interviewing from these behavioral coaching theories, where you're asking the right questions at the right time, and you're really empathetic and you make the user feel heard. Then there is the part of setting goals where it's all about collaborating with the user on making sure that they can set these smart goals that they can achieve in a reasonable time frame. And then there is the coaching phase of planning, which is all about, given that set goal, how do you collaborate with the user on setting this plan, which is realistic for them to achieve these goals. And actually, there is a fourth phase, which is checking in with the user over time. So once then the reasoner decides what is the coaching phase, understanding, goal setting, planning, or checking, then what it does is that it updates the system instructions of the talker so that the talker can follow these instructions. Now, the second key job of the reasoner is to be able to update the structured belief that it has about the user. And so similarly to how an actual human coach might be writing down in their notepad or in their laptop something like what are the key concerns of the user, their barriers, their goals, their motivations. Similarly, we keep track of this structured belief state in a JSON or XML schema that is keeping track of these important fields. And so this is basically some form of a small model of the user. So this connects to the theory of minds. Now, the third key job is to be able to provide this adaptive plan to the user. So this plan should be multi-step, it should have links to resources, it should be updated on the user feedback as you go. And if you remember from the story one, this is exactly what the Journeyfy agent was supposed to do. So here we can use some sort of Journeyfy technology in order to provide the adaptive plan. So let's look at a case study. Let's look at sleep coaching as an example. So for example, here you will have the first query of the user being like, I need your help on how to create a relaxing bedtime environment. So what the talker will do first is to look into memory and see what is the latest belief state which is produced by the reasoner. So the way that the talker and the reasoner talk to each other is through memory, through the talker reading what is the latest belief state produced by the reasoners into the memory. And so here you see just a very generic reasoner state, which is that the coaching phase is understanding and just it's a sleeping coaching journey. And so what then the talker knows is that I should have these system instructions which are all about the understanding coaching phase, so I should be doing motivational interviewing and I should be really empathetic. And so it says then, great, let's start working on creating a relaxing bedtime environment for you. What are some key things that might be disrupting your sleep? And then the user might say something like, I think noises and lights can be distracting, can you help create a plan? Now, the talker will read again what is the latest reasoner state, and so the reasoner state hasn't really changed because the reasoner hasn't had the time to actually produce that reasoner state. However, that's fine because the talker is still able to conduct the conversation in a good way, and it provides an initial plan. So it says here is a plan to eliminate distractions, and it has some bullet points on noise and light. So this is a fine plan, but it's not a great one because it doesn't have this link to resources and so on. However, next, if you have the user pressing on and the reasoner being able to really have the time to produce this next reasoner state where it says that the coaching phase is planning, then you can have this module that really says that when a certain thing happens, like for example in our case, when the coaching phase is planning, the talker should wait for the reasoner to finish. And so you can see here that the reasoner is able to produce a structured plan with link to resources, and then the talker is simply copying this response. And then again, the user might ask for feedback of, for example, how do we introduce new relaxing sounds and so on, and the plan is adapted and so on. So you can see then how these two agents are really able to synergize one with the other to then be able to both be these great planners, but also these very agile conversationalists. And we have these quantitative results that are just in the, I'm going to show you just a result, which is showing that across different rubrics, especially for goal setting and for planning, this talker reasoner architecture outperforms the talker only. To recap, we talked about the importance of adaptive plans, both in terms of a new front-end experience and in back-end. We talked about this thinking fast and slow paradigm and how this is useful for building this new set of agents that can help being these lifelong collaborators. And we also talked about coaching agents and the new unique opportunities that they present to us. So with that, thank you so much. Please reach out if you're interested. I would love to hear from you.